5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Hey gang, and welcome back to Alien Protocols. We have a very special guest today. This is a gentleman that I've been admiring his intellect, and when you hear his brief bit about his bio, you'll understand why. This gentleman is the CEO of Morningstar Applied Physics. For over 25 years, Paul Murad has served the public as a senior technology analyst for the Department of Defense, looking at foreign advanced and game-changing technology and defining U.S. future satellite systems for the next 25 years. He was the chair of the first high-frequency gravity wave meeting in 2003 and ran 5 STAIF, the Space Technology and Applications International Forum conferences. And those cover new propulsion technology, energy devices, communication issues. For 18 years, he served as a contractor and worked as a scientist within a diverse technical scientific communities. In these aerospace corporations, he was involved in state-of-the-art projects like the Apollo, the NERVA project, the nuclear rocket engine, the Space Shuttle, tactical and strategic missile systems, as well as the Navy's high-energy laser project. He is an associate fellow of the American Institute of Aeronautics and Astronautics. It's a real pleasure to welcome Paul Murad. Thank you so much, Paul.
Thank you very much for having me come.
You know, to have the opportunity to pick your brain, so to speak, and to know just a tiny sliver of the things you've seen and worked on, the projects, it's really, it's fascinating. How did you first, you know, your screen name has UFO in it. So you obviously have a compunction for this on some level. How did you get into UFOs?
Well, I got the name UFO guy from my son, and I didn't get involved in this, but I had cut some grass in my backyard to make a crop circle. And I was surprised to see private airplanes flying over my backyard, and what the heck? The way I got started on this is I've never been involved with a UFO incident, never seen one, so I'm kind of a virgin, so to speak, with all of this. I had sat down with a guy at lunchtime, and we were talking, and he was telling me, we ought to get involved with UFOs. I said, why? Well, there's a blue ray being used by some of these vehicles, and when you're hit by these blue rays, you don't operate anymore. Biologically, you're frozen. You're stuck right there, and this would have weapon implications. Well, I said, hey, that sounds great, but I don't want to get involved. He said, why? I said, I had gotten involved in so many other different projects that I was getting a bad reputation. People wouldn't want to get me involved, and I did not want to get involved in anything new and exciting, plus I wanted to play a low profile. Well, he talked to me for about every lunchtime for 6 months, and he kept hitting me with about UFOs, UFOs, UFOs. And I said, hey, look, I don't want to hear any more of this BS story about, hey, I was asleep and then I got up in the middle of the night and I walked around. I said, look, show me some evidence, show me something that's real. And then I'll see if I can, agree with you. Well, the next day he showed me all these pictures from public magazines and books, specifically the ones in Florida, Walton Beach. And the point here was, you might believe in UFOs or not, but look at these things, and why are they doing what they're doing? And why can't we do that? And just look at it. And I looked at the pictures and I said, my God, what the heck is going on here? They look metallic, they look real. There's no, hey, I dreamt of this type of stuff. So I started looking into it more and more. And then I had presented 2 technical papers at the AIAA on UFOs, which was unusual because nobody really wanted to accept things like that. And I went in there talking to the chairman, and he said to me, Paul, if you want to get across your point, don't tell them You have to convince them. Let them convince themselves. Let them look at the evidence and go from there. Now I go in there, and the first room is full with a lot of people. There's a bunch of young men in there. And some of them are giggling like, oh, we're going to see UFOs. What are we going to see? And I started showing them some of these pictures. And I could see their faces change. The laughter was gone. The smile was gone. And there was a look of awe and what is going on? Now, from an aerodynamic perspective, you got something that goes at zero velocity. Then it goes up to 1,000 feet per second, just like that. It goes from 0 to 15,000 feet, stops, makes a left-hand turn, does more than 30 Gs when a human being can't do more than 9 Gs. What is going on? There's no, well, there is exhaust on these things, but there's nothing that's obvious like a jet engine. The shape of a flying saucer aerodynamically is really, really, really bad. It's not graceful. So if you're designing an airplane, you gotta be very careful about the drag. But if I have an engine that barely gets along with it, I need to know about drag. But if I got an engine that can do whatever I want, I don't care what the shape looks like. So who's ever doing these things doesn't really care about aerodynamics. Well, what are they doing? What's going on? At this point, I was beginning to accept the faith that this is beyond our physics. And I still feel that way because there's a lot of good physics out there that we're discovering, but we're not using a sufficient amount right now to apply to this research. So something's going on. I look at it as not being a device that ejects particles like an exhaust from a jet engine or a rocket engine. So this thing must be operating on some sort of field. What kind of field? Electric field, magnetic field, gravitic field. Well, that's a $64,000 question right now. And I'm looking at some of these problems right now, and it's quite exciting. I think we can have some breakthroughs out there, but this will take some time. Does that help?
It sure does. And you know, there's so many things that are exciting about this mystery. So many different levels of it, from the nuts and bolts side to the, the psychological issues, to the sociological issues, to the technological issues, to the obvious new issues on physics it confronts us with. There's many different implications of this topic. And it's really fascinating. Do you have a specific case that is your favorite? Is there one that really stands out to you as really high evidentiary value, or one that you particularly find interesting for one reason or another?
I like the Ed Walters situations more than anything else, the Walton Beach, for one reason. The halo that seems to be flaming on the bottom of the vehicle, these are the nighttime pictures. I try to find other duplicating situations, and I found them, to my surprise. I found a picture in a book that was put out in 1957, where a guy was watching a baseball game with his son, and he took a picture of 2 UFOs above him. And you see 2 big splashes, and that's it. Well, this guy went and he looked at the densitometer of these 2 vehicles, and lo and behold, there was a halo underneath the vehicle in either of them. They're different sizes. Okay, then you look at other vehicles and you see the same thing. Then you read the story about Andreessen, who says that she's just an artist. She has these aliens come visit her in her backyard every now and then. And they like her because we're religious beings. Okay, I'll accept that at face value. And then the aliens tell her, hey, I'm going to make you an expert on propulsion. Come on out here, look at our vehicle. And they touch it, and for some reason, the vehicle becomes transparent. So she draws some sketches. The part of the problem that bothers me is they gave her a book, and they said, hang on to this book for a week or so, or a month or so, but don't look at what's inside the book. And they take off. Now, here you have the Holy Grail, possibly in this book. And this woman is so honest, she does not look inside the book.
That's like a classic Adam and Eve's, kind of thing. Eve had the apple, but she didn't bite the apple. This woman didn't bite the apple.
Oh, well, anyway, she took a picture of the device, and there are 4 spheres that rotate inside there. And if you look at what Mir says, the rotation is about 60 hertz or so.
Wow.
And you would get this glow. Now, there is a taping by Mir where he was next to a UFO, and he put the tape recording up, and he heard it. And it sounds like rotating machinery.
Wow.
It's amazing, low frequency. And it fits in what Andreessen said. And Paul Potter in Britain, the UK, has looked at this quite a bit. And it's clear to me that these balls are huge magnetic sources. There's microwaves involved. There's electrodynamic fields involved. And clearly, who's ever building these things has a fantastic understanding of Maxwell's equations and Einstein's field equations. But what's going on? Now, you mentioned Adam and Eve. We can make a little diversion here. That could have been a setup job. In other words, when God says to Adam and Eve, here's the tree of life, don't go near it, the tree is in the middle of the garden. If the tree was really bad, God would have put it off.
Right.
And he says to these guys, don't touch it. Now, when we read Genesis, it seems that, hey, God is gone, and 2 hours later, they go get the apple. What if they were good people, and they listened to God, and for a week went by, and they didn't touch the apple? A month goes by, a year goes by, a decade goes by. Maybe after 40 years, they decide, okay, let's try the apple. And as soon as they do, they get zinged by God and get kicked out. And now we're struggling ever since then. So you never know. You really don't understand what's going on. You try to look at things from a different perspective. And I'm sure people in the audience have never heard that viewpoint that Adam and Eve could have been there for decades before they violated God. Of course, they could have done it right away too, but that's just a hypothesis or speculation on my part.
No, but it's ignorance is bliss. Like, a chimpanzee doesn't have to worry about advanced aerial vehicles and larger creatures in a larger, universe than we ever anticipated. The chimpanzee just worries about that next banana and the opposite sex chimpanzee.
Absolutely, absolutely. Now, the question, going back to your original point about what's going on, how do we make this thing go? We haven't started talking about the spirituality aspect of this, the medical aspects of this. For example, when you have implants, they don't reject your body because they have a special coating on there, and people don't know they have implants unless they actually touch it. That's rather amazing. That's a medical proposition for us to understand. Spirituality, if these UFO guys are real, are we talking about God, or are we talking about aliens? And how do we just put that in our perspective? But let's go back to this issue about propulsion. If these vehicles move faster than the speed of light, if they go from something that's 4.5 light years away or hundreds of light years away, how did they get here? They have to get here faster than the speed of light. Either that, or you've got a huge spaceship out there where you've got one generation after another generation after another generation. And hey, after 30 generations, you go from point A to point B. So that doesn't look like a promising proposition. No. So these guys must be going faster than the speed of light. Well, if that's the case, how do you do that? Electricity, that moves at the speed of light. Magnetism, that moves at the speed of light. I'm not going to get faster than the speed of light. What's going on? And when I do this, I'm violating a sacrosanct idea, and that is Einstein's idea that thou shalt not go faster than the speed of light. The only thing that seems to go faster than the speed of light is gravity. And what evidence do I have to say that? Well, you look at a black hole, no light leaves it, which means no electrical forces come out of the black hole, no magnetic forces come out of the black hole. The only thing that comes out of a black hole is a gravitational attraction.
Wow.
See, that's what we got to do. Now, let's say you're moving along at faster than the speed of light, you're zipping along. How do you communicate with your base? If you use electromagnetically, it goes speed of light.
Yeah.
Hey, I go from point A to point B, do what I'm going to do, come back. I could come back before my message comes back using electromagnetic.
Yep.
So I have to do something else. What is it? Well,
Gravity waves.
So that was one reason we took off in that area, looking at those with that first meeting in 2003 at McLean. And it's a different technology, a different approach to look at. And maybe we need to seriously investigate it. That's not to say that radio telescopes are no good. The radio telescopes are excellent because they tell us about the stars. They give us the ideas of pulsars. For example, GPS is great when we're here on Earth. Can I use GPS to go to the moon? Oh, maybe. But let's say I want to go to Mars. I cannot use GPS here. I've got to use something else. The only thing left that I could see is using pulsar timing. Now, GPS uses an atomic clock, and that's very accurate. A pulsar rotates at anywhere from 10 to 600 times a second. It is far more accurate than an atomic clock. So you need to know radio telescopes, where are these pulsars located, and put them in a three-dimensional picture. Modify your GPS unit so that you can use the same algorithm, and then we've got navigation away from the Earth.
That is amazing. That is amazing. I mean, you've hit me with you've clobbered me with two major notions of physics that have blown my mind. One is that gravity goes faster than the speed of light, and you backed it up with the example of how the gravity waves have to affect the electromagnetism and prevent it from leaving, so the gravitic influence extends past electromagnetism and past the speed of light. So that's a mind blower to me. And then the notion of pulsars, because of their amazing regularity of their timing and being able to triangulate yourself with several pulsars, using those as an intergalactic GPS, both of those notions are mind blowing, absolutely mind blowing, incredible. So do you think these gravity waves, like LIGOS, that experiment proved gravity waves, do you think a newer understanding of gravity waves can be really the answer to those major questions that have plagued this faster than light travel?
If you look at the energy from gravity waves, they're proportional to the frequency to the fourth power. If you look at LIGO, which is low frequency gravity waves, the power level is very, 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 very low. But if you look at high frequencies, which have a factor of 4 power on there, you can do things. You can start seeing things. You can think about using gravity waves for imagery.
Wow.
In other words, you can go through the planet to see what's on the other side. You can use it for communications. And if you're smart enough, you know how to use it for propulsion. Now, Einstein says that the gravity field is a wave equation. Newton says that it's an elliptical partial differential equation. I was getting kind of mathematical for you. Newtonian gravitation, 1 over r squared, does not allow gravity waves. So you have to change gravity waves. When you look at the Pioneer 10 and 11, strange things happen beyond Saturn. In other words, gravity goes like 1 over r squared. Then all of a sudden, gravity becomes a constant. It's not 32.2 feet per second squared, but it's something like 10 to the minus 8 feet per second squared.
Wow.
Now, it's a very low level. maybe this gravity is throughout the universe, throughout the cosmos. It could explain the differences on the rotation of galaxies and spirals. And it can more or less tell you that there's no such thing as dark matter.
I was about to say that if that explains the rotation of galaxies, what happens to dark matter? But I guess it doesn't matter anymore.
Well, look at it this way. If you looked at, I can't think of his name, in 1989, the MOND, M-O-N-D approach was developed, where he looked at the gravitation for the spirals in galaxies. And he looked at what he could see versus what he was getting from the mathematics. And it was short by a factor of 2 to 3. And the viewpoint is that we need more mass out there than in the solar system. Well, maybe that's the answer to that question. That's good reasoning. So intellectually, I don't look at dark matter as being intellectually an artifact. I can't see it, therefore it must be dark. I don't see this, I can't touch it, but hey, it's got no electrical, it's neutrally electrically, it's neutral magnetically. Well, how could you say that when you don't see it? And then let's assume this thing that UFOs fly around at faster than the speed of light. What'll happen if they hit some of this dark matter? Splat! They ain't gonna travel very far, and they ain't gonna travel very much. Those that can won't last very long. So there's gotta be something else out there. Maybe there's nothing. And maybe there's this gravitational force that's out there all the time. And we look at it as maybe noise. We look at the mathematical equations. Like I said, Einstein comes out with a wave equation. There's characteristics on a wave equation. It's a mathematical artifact. But the thing is this, if you can force these characteristics to come together, and it's the same thing in aerodynamics, you would end up with a shock. You end up with a shock wave for aerodynamics. The question here is, can you generate a gravitational shock? Now, if you can, you could put this into a box. You're going to make one hell of a propulsion scheme that gets you wherever you want to go. But that's something that, I have it in various technical papers, but I would prefer to get some experimental evidence to prove it.
Well, that's really fascinating. I mean, really fascinating. It's obvious that these advanced aerial vehicles represent new science, a whole new level of understanding of science, a new perspective on it. And that whole new perspective on gravity sounds so logical. It just seems like such a logical fit to the puzzle. And
well, look at it this way. How do you detect something moving faster than the light? There's no way we can do that. We can talk about an IR sensor, we can talk about radar, we can talk about visual, but how do you do this? Now, there's something that leaves black holes, and that are jets. These jets go out for light years. People claim that the debris around the black hole, which makes the accretion disk, is the capability that produces these jets. Well, if I look at that debris like fluids, I cannot duplicate this jet. It doesn't work that good. If these jets come out of the black hole, they have to be naturally formed, faster than light phenomena.
And then change.
Yes, absolutely. In other words, we can see something moving faster than the light by looking at these jets, and maybe we can learn something new in the process. So there are things out there that need to be explored.
It seems like a very big shift in our scientific thinking, but not only just in terms of the science and the physics, in terms of society. You know, around Galileo and Copernicus, people thought that everything revolved around the earth, and the churches thought everything revolved around the earth. And now as time has passed, hundreds of years have passed, but we still, humans, believe everything revolves around us. And just by their very presence, these craft indicate that we are not alone. that there are others out there, and maybe the universe doesn't revolve around us, not only sociologically, but now we see the science behind it too. There's two big shifts that we're in we seem to be in this paradigm shift, perhaps, or in the middle of this transition from, a pre-Copernican kind of thinking, to this new modern thinking with this ability where the distances don't matter, and humanity's place in the universe is a lot more dynamic than perhaps we ever thought before. How do you think science has to proceed forward? This is really powerful technology.
If you look at the Earth as being only 4.5 billion years old, and the Big Bang is 13 billion years old, we're not talking about advanced civilizations by 100 years or so, but possibly millions and possibly billions. Now, recently we had this huge thing come into our solar system and come out of it. The problem I had with that thing is I've never seen a meteor that had a fineness ratio of 1 to 6 or 1 to 10. And I think somebody had mentioned, I think it was Hawkins that mentioned that this could be a derelict spacecraft. I strongly believe something like that. And we're probably going to see more. And that particular thing could have gone through our solar system. It came in such a view that from the Earth, you could not see it until it's approaching the Earth past the sun, and before the sun, between the Earth and the sun. In other words, I could not see it all the way out there.
Yes.
And the sun is in the way, and then bingo, I see it, and it goes away.
And that's a classic slingshot maneuvering, a way to classically...
Very interesting perspective. And if I was going to go into another solar system, I think I'd like to do the same way.
And isn't that very efficient in terms of energy usage? You're just strictly using the gravity to slingshot you to the next location. And it was shaped kind of like a pencil. It had a very, if one was traveling this way, it would have a very aerodynamic kind of perspective. But regardless, that shape.
If you really cared. But what if you have infinite thrust? You don't care.
Don't matter then.
Now, the other part of the problem is, if this is a sensor system, we expect something else from coming there. I was against this notion that, what's his name? Sanger, not Sanger, the guy that came out with Voyager, where they got this platter with the pictures and all this stuff, and look at.
Oh, put on the side, Sagan, Carl Sagan.
Yes.
Yes.
I gave this quite a bit of thought, and I'm saying to myself, this is dumb, because what if it's met by a bunch of aliens who happen to be protein eaters?
Yeah.
So, why do I want to tell these guys, hey, here's a menu for you. We're on the Earth, come on by and fill up your stomachs.
Right, advertise our naivety to the universe. Well, this brings us to a good point. You're a pragmatic guy. You're a scientist. You've seen enough evidence to believe that they're real. Who and what do you think they are? Do you think they're strictly extraterrestrials? Could they be somehow some emissaries of our own society from the future going backwards in time? What, is it different species? Is it one species? Could it have been a von Neumann probe that landed thousands of years ago and has been replicating or built a factory and it's all just that species? Do you have any specific thoughts?
Well, I haven't given it much time about time travel. I've done some research on wormholes, and in my perspective, the mathematics is light. It's not there. And without the evidence, it's not there. For example, we've never seen a wormhole, with the exception of the ranch out in, I think it was Utah. So we are very limited, and we have to find some speculative approaches to get there. And it's just hard to say about going back into time. The issue is that in the here and now, I would say that there's a lot of people out there. You have anywhere from 4 to 7 different species that have visited us on the Earth. And we see that in some pictures. For example, if you look at these recent pictures about aliens in Roswell, these guys are 3 feet tall and so on, and they're bald and they have unusual shapes. If you look at the mythology in the UK about fairies, they fit that category.
Yeah.
When I went to Armenia, I went to a place called Karahunj, and I might have started a major problem with this. When you go to this place, it was called the Armenian Stonehenge. It was a circle with 208 rocks with about 84 holes in them. And then the center was these 30-foot rocks, and there were 3 tentacles off of the circle. As you walk toward the big rock, there's grass and brambles. But as you get in within 100 feet, grass disappears. When you look at the holes, they look at the mountains, and you say to yourself, okay, if the sun is there, it's time to plant. If the sun's there, it's time to harvest, whatever. Now, there was a few of them that were aimed at the sky. And you have to say, what's going on? Then you see these placards. They're about 3/4 of an inch thick. This is 10,000 years old. It's got a shape on it. It's got a pear-shaped head with teardrop eyes. The shoulders are just a little bit bigger than the head width.
Wow.
And you start saying to yourself, my God, these look like aliens. Now, a professor went there under several expeditions. He passed away. And he walked away with the conclusion that the people here at Karahunj, 10,000 years ago, knew that the earth was round, knew that the earth was 8,000 miles wide. Now, we're doing something without any writing. How this guy could figure this out amazes me. But then he says that they knew the precession of the earth, the vibration of the axis of the earth. Now, you start saying to yourself, you got these objects there saying that they must have seen something. Chances are, underneath those 30-foot rocks is probably a crash, a UFO crash. UFO probably landed there, some people got off, they were there for some period of time, did their thing, interacted with the people there, they were friendly, and then went on from there. But the point here is, those 3 bits of information I gave you, can you imagine being from an alien civilization, and you're going to tell some farmers and shepherds about the earth being round and so on? Don't know. It's amazing. Now, the Armenians at that time period came up with a god named A-R. Well, the Egyptians had a god named R-A. Okay, what's going on here?
There's a lot of those cultural similarities around the world and around that time period too. And you know, it's interesting you say 10,000 years ago. I just interviewed Dr. Jerry Croth, and he was talking about how the human mind changed dramatically around 12,000 years ago and got dramatically smarter. And with your discussion about the involvement with different cultures, with these potential other beings and races, where are you going here, Paul?
Well, to begin with, you hit the deadline here for 12,000 years, 10,000 years. That's when man started growing up. It's hockey puck. We were growing up earlier than that. Look at the pyramids. Where's the tallest pyramid in the world?
And it's the oldest, the tallest one in the world. Isn't that Mexico?
Nope.
No, China.
Nope.
Oh, not Mexico, it's the great emperor of China. Guatemala. Bosnia? Really? Wow, I didn't know
Bosnia, Herzegovina.
Yeah. Oh, that's the 5-sided pyramid, right?
They found some pyramids there that was anywhere from 17 to 20,000 years old.
Wow.
There was cement there.
Wow.
There was still cement there. Now, for the average person to do cement, it ain't going to last more than 50 years. Who says this thing's going to last 20,000 years? What's going on? Who put this together? Now, the way the Serbians found it is they looked at the shape and they got rid of it. They got rid of 20,000 years of dirt. And these things came out looking pristine.
Wow.
So take a look on the internet. It's great stuff to look for. And you got to say to yourself, this knowledge that we were only 10,000 years old, that's trash. That's got to be trash. We got to be older than that. Or at least some of us are smarter than the rest and go from there. So,
what do you,
go ahead.
You know, we've kind of followed a trail of, you know, the science leading us to whoever these visitors are that are interacting with us. And we followed it now back 10,000 years. You know, a big question that a lot of people have in this field is the role of consciousness. Oftentimes people connect intellectually with just their minds with UFOs. People who've been on the craft say that the craft itself is controlled by consciousness. I know you're a physicist, but physicists have to have an understanding of consciousness because it plays a role all the way down to like the two-slit experiment. Do you think that consciousness plays a role in the technology and in the phenomena in general?
Well, let's go a step further. Somebody asked me, what will the human being look like in the future? Let's say a couple of thousand years from now. You see people at the gyms and hey, I can lift 200-pound weights. I can lift 400-pound weight. I'm bulky. Where will you have to use lifting 200 or 400-pound weight? That doesn't buy much. So if anything, and who's more healthy? The big bulky guy, does he get to be 65 years old? Or do you get the thin guy?
Who's super smart. No, it's okay. It's okay. You know, the super smart person. You want to stop right here for a second?
Hang on for a second. Wait a minute.
Okay.
We get a problem over here, and that is we get a lot of
telemarketers.
Yes. Let me give it to my wife. Get rid of that altogether. So we're not talking about a bulky body. So we're talking about thin people. All the older people that are really old, they're thin. Okay, they stay healthy. They're not obese. They're not with all sorts of things that they have problems with. What about their head? Well, the head cavity has grown quite a bit. And you would assume that the species with the largest cavity wins. Well, that's wrong. Because Neanderthal had larger cavities than anybody else. They didn't make it. So there's some sort of balance in here. Now your body, your brain has a left side and a right side. If you were allowed to change things, you would go to four sides. So you would use, well, when you think like a serial approach, A, B, C, D, E. You would go to parallel if you had four sides. So you can do lots of A, B, C's together. So that's how mankind might evolve. The other thing is when we look at DNA, we think of a double spiral. Well, what if there was 3 spirals or 4? What does that mean? We don't know. What would it look like? We can't even guess. Now, if that's the possibility, what do we expect to see away from our solar system? It's enough to cross your eyes. So you have to keep an open mind. Now, let me mention something that, you know, we have the conventional wisdom, and like you've already suggested, I'm kind of thin about some of the things I'm suggesting. When you look at the conventional wisdom, the answers you get are routine. You're not going to learn anything. But when you have an anomaly, you start to stop and think, saying, hey, why doesn't my anomaly differ from the conventional wisdom. And then you look at evidence of the anomaly, and then you have to make a decision. Do I believe what I've seen here or not? And then you have to assume whether you're an honest or dishonest person. If you're honest, then you have to have the responsibility of changing the conventional wisdom to absorb what you see in that anomaly and make a new conventional wisdom. For us on this problem, it requires people to be open-minded. I think the issue should be open to the perspective of saying, let academia go out there and start doing its thing. Look at all the suffering that people have where they said, hey, I saw this, and they've been ostracized for doing this, saying this. And if you look at some of these pictures that people have taken with UFOs out there, it's enough to scare the living blankety blank out of you, okay? I'll give you one example in Canada where the guy is going to, I got to get crawler faster, closer. You see the lights all over the place. It's enough to cross your eyes. Now, when people talk about a UFO flying by a car and the car stops and it keeps going and the car restarts.
Yes.
No. That doesn't happen. If you are sitting next to a UFO 100 feet away and you have a radio and you put on channel X, nothing happens. Well, that could be done with 5 watts at that frequency. But then I hit the other buttons and none of them work. That thing must be generating a megawatt of power just sitting on its ass. Now, when these things are going over your vehicle, you don't have a distortion in your electric system. You have your electric system get burnt out. Why is it burnt out? It's inducing more electric currents. You're going through transformers, capacitors, inductors, bingo. You got to get yourself a new car. So they're generating this power at extremely high level.
But like you say, it's not burning out. It's not inducing such a current that it burns out the system. These cars oftentimes start up right afterwards. You know?
No. I'm saying they don't start up.
They don't afterwards. There's stories, yeah.
It's very rare that they do start up. That doesn't happen.
It just never seems to make sense. Yeah, I'm glad to hear that.
You're lucky if it'll work. Now, you're floating around with this vehicle, lots of electrical power, lots of magnetic power. How could you biologically survive?
Take it. Yeah, good point.
Now, these aliens are gray. Gray is a neutral color. If you go through these hybrid babies, one of the stories was that they're held in a cage, a test tube with a blue liquid. You start saying to yourself, what kind of blue liquid could it be? Well, copper. So you're protecting the baby with this copper liquid that probably minimizes most of the electric and magnetic fields. Okay.
And creates the gray.
Now, the other point is, what are these guys that we see? Are they biological beings like us? Well, they all seem to be doing the same thing during their abductions. So they appear to be robotic. In other words, they're biological robots.
Yeah.
And that's what we're looking at. It seems that you can't sit down with these guys under certain circumstances and say, hey, look, you're going to hurt me. Now, these guys have certain technologies, but they have technologies they don't have. For example, human nature, dealing with the biology. They have certain problems about us that they understand, but others they don't. For example, if somebody is abducted, they have gone through trauma that's enough to cross your eyes. And in some cases, they're revealed based upon hypnosis. And some remember that when they went through these examinations, they were under terrible, terrible pain and anguish. In other words, it's not a great honor to be abducted. and to be examined. And we literally can say, God knows what's going to happen to us, because we don't know what the heck's going to happen to us.
It's such an amazing phenomenon.
So there's some limitations of their capabilities. And the other thing is, they don't seem to understand human emotionality. For example, I guess I'm quoting some of the stuff from Andreessen. They will abduct something over a period of time from 3 to 7 years. They repeat over and over and over. And in cases where they're women, they will take a hybrid child and allow the woman to pet the baby. And the baby will change, the child will change. And they don't understand what's going on between the ties between human beings and the children. And the women accept it because they understand that this hybrid is part of my body. And, you know, from a biological perspective, do we understand that? Do we understand how to deal with the trauma that you've seen?
The implications of this stuff is staggering. The implications of all of that stuff is staggering.
Well, look at what the astronauts have seen. Those that went to the moon and Mars, for example. Well, Mars, if you look at the rover, but we'll talk about that later, you can see some crash there, okay? And you can see that on the moon. And these guys claim they had villages there that they saw, or they were threatened, or they were being watched. And if you don't have a 45 caliber pistol to protect your butt, you got to be very, very, very friendly. You know, very agreeable. And these guys are saying, get the heck out my moon. It's not your moon. And you start saying, hey, wait a minute. What happened here?
Right. Let me ask you a question. The government has released since December 3 videos through To the Stars. And these videos have shown through the government's latest sensor equipment, the best sensor equipment, some of the best sensor equipment in the world, from these F-18 Super Hornets and other aircraft, have showed forward-looking infrared radar, have shown forward-looking infrared cameras, have described how these craft have gone from space, tumbled through the atmosphere, tumbled through the sky, and into the water even. And they were not even detected by submarines underwater. These craft are real. They represent a real technology. It doesn't seem way super far, but they're visible. They're here. Do you think just sociologically that reality, that there is another advanced civilization making its presence known to us, do you think that reality is too much for society to handle? Not just people like us or scientists, but even people around the world and other cultures. Do you think it's too much? I know they did the Brookings Institute study in the 50s, and that said it would be detrimental for society. But knowing what you know about science, about sociology, about people, do you think they can handle that reality?
Well, let me say that first off the bat, I've been retired from the government for 9 years, so I can't say that, hey, I know the latest. But I will tell you that I've seen satellite imagery about 20 years ago, where a guy asked me, come here, I want to show you something. And he shows an area of a test range, and there's a circular object there. These things have been captured. They've probably been captured on the International Space Station. They're all over the place. If you look at it real hard on the internet, you can find this. Regarding the comment you made about submarines, there is 6 pictures through a periscope that somebody took about 10 years ago, seeing something coming out, coming up, floating around, and it's gone.
Yeah.
Those were fascinating pictures. People on the just going home saying, hey, I'm taking a picture of my internet, and bingo, you blow it up. You say, what the hell is going on? Now, one of the pictures made on the moon was a bunch of rocks, and I love it with these kids from the internet. Hey, here's another picture from Mars and Moon. Let's look at every little rock.
Speck, yeah, right.
Like they got nothing else to do.
Right.
And they'll do that. And lo and behold, they find the head, a red head, of a robot on the moon. Okay. What happened to the rest of it?
Right.
Why is it, right?
You can see those in clouds. You can see robot heads in clouds. But when an astronaut says, like Glenn who spoke about the monolith on Phobos, one of Mars's moons, and there's different types of monoliths, different places that, you know, it's, do you think society can handle the fact that there's like, people like us? It's fascinating, it's exciting, and even kids nowadays.
Let me go one step further. One of my colleagues is John Brandenburg, Dr. John Brandenburg, who was on the History Channel every now and then. By far one of the most brilliant guys I know of. About 8 years ago, he says to me, you know, the rover found some isotopes on potassium isotopes, xenon isotope on Mars. Isn't that amazing? And I looked at him and I said, who cares? He said, no, because these isotopes are there. I said, look, I have no idea what that means. What are you telling me? He said, those isotopes are only created after a nuclear explosion, a fission or a fissile explosion.
Wow.
I said, wait a minute. You're going to put this in a technical paper? Who cares what you're saying? But damn it, put that in there. Turns out that NASA are nice guys, geologist guys. They looked at this stuff and, oh, who cares? Now, John had worked with nuclear weapons. He knew about the after fact of what you get. And there's not a magnetometer, a spectrometer in orbit on Mars, and it did the whole surface. Lo and behold, the whole surface is covered by all this stuff.
Wow.
Now, if there are huge nuclear explosions, you could have blown off the ocean. You could have blown off the atmosphere.
And there's only one way that could have happened, if a civilization was there that built nuclear weapons and destroyed itself.
Well, the viewpoint is that if there was a civilization there, it killed itself ecologically. Well, you can do it too by nuclear explosions. John claimed that the explosions were millions of years ago, and I disagree, but I think there's something in the Bible about Ruth tells something that happened about 6,000 years ago that could have been what went on, but that's between him and I. Now the question is, what is going on? The Russians in 2001, Novosibirsk, were interacting with me, and we did some research on several things. For example, you see the same face on the moon, on the Earth, but you see the same face on every planet, on every major moon. In other words, gravity might not be just an attraction, but an attraction and angular momentum. And everything is synchronously rotating about each of these bodies. So he calls this asteroid belt between Jupiter and Mars Phaeton. And he says when you add up all the rocks together, it's just slightly smaller than Mars.
Wow.
Well, maybe there might have been a nuclear catastrophe between Mars and Phaeton, where Phaeton definitely lost. And Mars, because of some of the effects, they lost too.
Wow.
Now, to go one step further in this, and I tried to put this out for a grant, no one accepted it. There was a moon on Phaeton, and it went flying. And where did it go? It hit Jupiter, and it's the eye.
That's the spot.
So you start looking at this, and you start asking people, we need to do some serious thinking about this. We've got to put some speculation out there and find out if it makes sense.
Yeah,
Now,
and these things are certainly worth investigating.
well, if you look at the face on the moon, on Mars, and there's a face on the moon as well, people made comments that, hey, that's rock. and hey, it's primitive civilization. Those rocks are not a couple of 100 feet by 100 feet. Those spaces are 1.5 miles long by 1 mile wide. There are 3 of them, and the 4th of them is on the side of a mountain that looks like the face of a woman.
Yeah.
And it's looking over what might have been a sea. So can you imagine being in your yacht floating around and you see this beautiful picture of this woman? That's what you would see. But the others are eroded because of the environment. Somehow it's protected on that mountain.
It's amazing. You're such a fascinating guy, Paul, where you're a scientist and you can wrap your brain around the mechanics of the physics behind these craft, but at the same time, you're open up, your mind is open enough to look at some of these more deeper esoteric questions about the faces on Mars and the cultures and all that stuff. And wow, you're really blown my mind. I didn't expect to hear so many of these other things as well too. So,
well, I appreciate the comment. My wife wouldn't tell me that, but I do.
Well, it's amazing. Your knowledge of this topic is really, really vast. You know, we've already gone over time, and I could just literally go on for hours about your experiences, about, propulsion stuff, about aliens, their agendas, all this stuff. But you've really put together a lot of amazing pieces for us, and just can't tell you how much we appreciate your time. And would you consider the possibility of doing perhaps a future interview or two in the distant future? We'd love to discuss more, and I'm sure our viewers would love to hear more about your perspectives on the science side of it, and more just of your insights into UFOs in general and the culture that seems to be behind these UFOs. And you have so many interesting facts when you were talking about the 4 different species. And I mean, wow, it's really been entertaining. And, I appreciate your time very much. Is there anything else you'd like to share with us, or any thing you'd like to promote for the viewers?
Well, I don't know I don't know if I want to say this or not.
Say it.
We're looking at some levitation experiments. The device I made, the Morningstar Energy Box, is a rotating electromagnetic device. It lost 7% of its weight. The thing weighs 190 pounds.
Now, I didn't want to say anything about this, Paul, because I knew about this.
Okay. Maybe we'll talk about it some other time.
No. Let's dive in. You brought it up. This is so fascinating. I'm familiar with Joe Firmage's electronic gyro. I've done a little bit of research on the topic myself, all the way from...
We started by looking at a Searle device and then the Russian Russian device.
Mm-hmm.
These guys have a center ring that is laminated with copper, aluminum, steel, and permanent magnets. I was too cheap. I did not want to put in permanent magnets in there, so I put in ferromagnetic liquid, a layer around there.
Mercury, right?
No. It's literally olive oil with some iron filings.
Wow. Okay.
And it works great. When we had a presentation with Gooden, one of the Russian scientists, he said we did better than he did.
That's amazing.
Upset, but
was this done with Martin Tajmar and Clovis D'Amatos? No, this is a separate device.
Absolutely.
That's fascinating. This is fascinating.
It cost us about $500,000 to make the device.
Wow.
Found a very nice person to pay.
Losing 7% is revolutionary. That just in and of itself, that first initial metric is revolutionary. Where are you going to go from here?
But Belnikov looked at the spinning disk, superconducting disk, and he got 2%. And when he jammed it up to a lot more RPM, he got it up to about 6%, excuse me. But that hasn't been confirmed. The thing is, we ran 4 different test series a month apart. And on 3 of them, we got plus or minus 2 to 5 pounds of device.
Wow.
And all of a sudden, at the end, with the last day, with the last time we got to do it, we got at least 14 to 20% pounds less. And
revolutionary. Congratulations. That's revolutionary.
Well, I appreciate it. And we're looking at other devices right now. And
you've heard of the Firmage device. I've seen that. There's videos of it on the internet. There's been a bunch of incarnations of that device. There's people around the world doing this. There's a race on this e-gyro thing. And it's from what the research I've done, you guys are, you know, I didn't want to talk about it because we hadn't, you know, said that it was appropriate to do so before the conversation. So I didn't want to talk about anything that may be classified or confidential even. But you are on the team that's doing it. And this is amazing news. It's amazing news. This could be revolutionary for society. I don't even know if listeners really understand how revolutionary that device could be. I mean, mention just a couple of the potential uses. To reduce the specific gravity of so many things, right?
Just a spacecraft. Just a spacecraft.
Just a spacecraft.
We are looking at a device that we might want to use for moving a satellite without using propulsion.
Amazing.
Or propellant. And we're looking at other schemes that look good. One of the problems that come across, you know, I hear a lot of stories from, well, I speak to this alien and this is what he says. You know, I take that with a grain of salt, but listen to what you're being told anyway. And the question here, it comes back with, hey, you know, you guys, human race, have really advanced quite a bit with science, but you missed something along the way. Now, at that point, you start saying to yourself, what did we miss? What do we have to do to go back to understand what's going on? And that's part of the problem. You've got to look at this stuff from a very basic perspective. And maybe get away with the blinders, open up the blinders to see what's going on, keep an open mind. And when Searle did his thing, he claimed he had flying devices.
Yep.
Chances are nobody believed what he had to say. But the thing is, he apparently believed that he ran across some physical phenomena. On that basis alone, although he does not understand what it is, that's important.
Yes.
What went on? He's got these spinning magnets going around like crazy. And they seem to be doing strange things. And what we found out, I tried to make a test run where I put crystals in there instead. And what I wanted to do is run this thing at 10 minutes and then run it up and start seeing if I'd lose weight one way or the other. We had changed some components from a 6 horsepower motor to a 1 horsepower motor. I had these crystals in place, and there I had it spinning up, and it's at 200 RPM, and I'm going to go for 10 minutes. And after 5 minutes, it burned out the motor. Everything locked up. And the only difference, didn't change the RPM, was those crystals.
Wow.
Was there something going on we did not understand? Did it generate some electromagnetic field that we did not understand? And clearly, we have to go back to a 6 horsepower motor. It's going to take a little time to do it. But that's my problem. And we think we have a source.
Well, you should get this funded like crazy, because we would want this built by the Allies rather than anyone else. This is revolutionary stuff.
The problem is with the government, you need to show evidence to get something done. And that's not the approach. The thing is, some of this is high risk, and venture capitalists they're afraid of it because they might not get anything. Right now, we found a venture capitalist, and we're going to make something happen with levitation.
Well, we feel very privileged to have crossed that point in this conversation. I knew some of this information, but out of respect to you and the whole everything, I didn't want to bring it up, but I'm so delighted that you were frank with us and open, and you're a really impressive guy. You really are, not only in your savvy, but in your open-mindedness. And just got to say thank you so much for sharing your time with us. And we really appreciate it, Paul.
It's my pleasure.
And continued success. We are going to be rooting for you and cheering for you. And I'm sure that 14% that appeared 14 to 20% will become 25%, and the numbers will go up and be repeatable and empirical. And good luck to you. God bless.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Paul. I appreciate your time.
Goodbye.